Hi, I'd like to do an inquiry of what it is to have a healthy mind and what a healthy mind can do for us. So I'm going to say that a healthy mind is capable of identifying truth, choosing what is good, and being able to appreciate beauty and enjoy happiness. So I'm going to suggest that thinking clearly leads to happiness, and happiness starts by thinking clearly. Now, the idea of happiness coming from a healthy mind dates back centuries, even back to ancient Greece. I'm sure even farther back, but we get records of it from ancient Greece and Aristotle, Socrates. Others thought about this. So many philosophers in the Greek period thought about this long and hard, and they came up with a set of rules for rational thinking, or how to think clearly. So think of these as building blocks by which we can build rational thought and discover truth, and which you're probably already using right now without thinking about it. So here are the rules, which by the way are called laws of thought. The first one's called the law of identity, and it says anything that is unique and it's different from everything else. It has its own identity. You could say A equals A or 1 equals 1. But anyway, by recognizing something's unique identity, we can know it and give it its own unique name. Now, Aristotle said that the identity of something came from its material, what it's made of, the form, its shape, and its location in time and space. So, for instance, I have a yellow cup, big yellow cup. Okay, it's unique in its material, form, and location in time-space. Well, now I have two yellow cups. They're identical in their material, form, and location in time, but they're different in location and space. So they are two separate things, and I should give them each their own identity. I could call this yellow cup 1 and this yellow cup 2, but what I couldn't do is call them both yellow cup 1. That would be equivocation, which means calling two things by the same name. So, also too, if two people happen to be talking about an object that they see, and they discover that the object, after comparing notes, they discover that the object is made of the same material, same form, and it's same location in time and space, well then they discover they're actually talking about the same thing. So that's the law of identity. Everything that is unique and has its own identity and should have its own name. Second one's called the law of non-contradiction. So something cannot be and not be at the same time in the same way, or A cannot equal not A. If something is, basically it says if something is true about an object, then it cannot also be false in the same way. So again, I cannot say that this is a yellow cup and it is also not a yellow cup. That's a contradiction. Okay. Next law is called the law of excluded middle. Therefore, everything either is or is not. There is no middle ground between the two states. A is either made of A or not A. And this is actually a logical consequence of the first two. Law of identity says something is identified by its characteristics. Then non-contradiction says, well, then it cannot not have those contradictions. So excluded middle says it either must have or must not have those characteristics. So back to our yellow cup. I can say that this cup is either yellow or is not yellow. That is the excluded middle. It must be one or the other. Finally, we get to the law of sufficient reason, or sometimes called the principle of cause and effect. While the Greeks knew about this principle, Gottfried Leibniz really developed it, so I'm going to let him define it. He said, no fact can hold or be real, and no proposition can be true unless there is a sufficient reason why it is so and not otherwise. Now, basically he's just saying, for A to exist, that means something caused A to be what it is now. Everything that exists now is the effect of some prior cause. So, here I have my cup. This cup must have been caused, or this cup is an effect of something prior to it that made it happen. Okay, so basically it says for everything that exists, something caused it to exist. Now this is also saying that now that this cup does exist, it has the potential to cause something else to be. So I could pour water in it, and now I have water in this. So basically the law of cause and effect says that for everything it is, we can know why it is the way it is. Okay? So those are the 4 rules. So rational thinking means to follow a set of rules that allows one to infer truth. So rational thinking means to follow these building blocks as a set of rules so that we can infer truth. So how would we know truth? Well, let's take these building blocks and see where we can go. Let's say a statement is made. My friend says, it's going to rain soon. Now, before I believe it, there must be some evidence to support the claim. Now, evidence has to provide 2 things to support the claim. First, is the evidence true? I go out and I also see dark clouds on the horizon. So yes, it is true. There are dark clouds. Second, does the evidence support the claim? Now, dark clouds often does mean rain. So at this point, I have some justification for a reasonable belief that it could rain. It's not saying that it will, and it's not saying that my belief is very strong, but at least it's better than 0. Okay, so right at this point, because I also see some clouds in the sky, and dark clouds do mean rain many times, then I can say, okay, there's a reasonable belief that this could rain. Now at this point, there could be a defeater, meaning that there's not enough clouds in the sky for me to think it's rain. So while I have a reasonable belief, I also have a lot of room for doubt. Okay, so reasonable belief just means I've seen this pattern before, and seeing this pattern, it's reasonable to expect that the effect could happen. And that's all it's saying. Okay, there is some evidence now to believe that the statement is true. Okay, so now let's say it's gotten even more cloudier, and now clouds are covering about a little more than half of the sky. Because there's more clouds than not, we would call this, now I have a justification, a stronger justification for believing, and we would call this, because it's a preponderance of evidence, meaning that based on the amount of evidence we see, it's now more probable to be true than the claim is now more probable to be true than not. So the evidence has at least gone over 50%. There's still some room for doubt, but the evidence is now, at least it's gone slightly, it's at 51-49. So now it's more probable to believe it than not. We would call that preponderance of evidence. So based on that, I have a stronger belief. Okay? Well, okay. Now let's say the weather service comes on and says, hey, weather radar says a storm is coming in your direction and it should get here in the next half hour. Okay, now we have even more evidence. Okay, at this point we would call this, our belief now is justified even stronger, because we would call this clear and convincing evidence. Okay, it now means that the evidence for the belief, for the statement, is so highly and substantially more likely to be true than not true. So basically now what we're saying is the evidence is greater than 50%, and there are no really good defeaters, or at least the defeaters are any argument that would counter the argument that it's going to rain soon is getting weaker and weaker. So more evidence is coming in, it's greater than 50%, and there's no really good, strong arguments against it, okay? So this is what we would call clear and convincing evidence, okay? And now you're really justified in believing that it's going to rain soon. Okay, so finally our friend looks outside and says, hey, rain is coming down the street and it's moving toward us and it's going to rain on us in the next minute. Okay, now at this point we would say this is evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, because the evidence is so strong that it's going to rain. It points to a moral certainty, and that it is beyond dispute that any other reasonable alternative, or it's beyond dispute that any reasonable alternative explanation is possible. Okay, the evidence is so strong that one feels morally obligated to believe it and would be morally culpable or morally obstinate for not believing it. Okay, so the evidence is now much greater than 50%, and any defeater argument is much less than 50%. Okay, the evidence is so strong that you really can't put a different case to it. All the evidence points to one thing, and there's no good evidence to support any other statement. Okay, now you're still not 100%, but at this point you pretty much got to go with it. Again, we don't know anything for 100%, but certain things we know, so based on so much evidence that we morally are obligated to believe it, and we are again obstinate at that point for not believing. Okay, so for instance, let's just say I went out, after it rained, I said, oh my gosh, I left my clothes out on the clothesline and it rained and now all my clothes are wet and soggy. Oh shoot, why did that happen? Or, what a bad thing. Well, my friend would say, no, you're not, you're without excuse. You knew it was going to rain, so you should have brought those clothes in, okay? So you don't give me an excuse that you didn't know that it was going to rain. You had plenty of evidence to let you know that it was going to rain soon, and you should have brought the clothes in. So that's what we mean by being morally obligated to believe something and morally culpable if you don't believe it. Okay, so we've gone over the ground rules for rational thought. They are, first off, the building blocks: the law of identity, law of non-contradiction, the law of the excluded middle, and then the law of cause and effect. Or sometimes, again, it goes by both names, law of cause and effect, or the law of sufficient reason. Okay, and we've seen how we can use these laws as building blocks to make a case for believing something is true or not true, and how much weight we can give to our belief. In our next video, we'll see how we can use these building blocks in practical applications in logic, law, science, philosophy, theology, and even mystery novels. We will see how these building blocks can lead us to truth, goodness, beauty, and happiness. Okay, bye.